Without a doubt, 2 Point Museum is the new gold standard for the 2 Point series. There are many reasons why, but to distill it down, the gameplay has been drastically expanded with the new mission system, and with 5 different museum types, variety has been vastly improved, which has been a real Achilles for the series. Now, if you already love 2 Point series, 2 Point Museum will easily become your favorite. Alternatively, if you've never tried it or have bounced off before, 2 Point Museum has made enough adjustments in the right areas to welcome in new players. You begin your journey at Memento Mile Museum, a prehistoric museum with an absence of a curator, and you just happen to be the right person for the job. Memento Mile basically serves as your tutorial for the game, as it has the important structural aspects already laid out for you. It will then begin walking you through the first steps that you need to do and how to do them, including hiring staff and filling the museum with exhibits. It doesn't take long for 2 Point Museum to remove the training wheels, as it trusts the player's intelligence after being taught the core systems. It allows the player to explore and learn on their own. It also very subtly tries to guide you with an invisible hand, as the announcer will offer some snarky advice at times, such as the museum will no longer be taking donations because we don't have enough donation boxes. 2 Point Museum is a very layered game, and this is a perfect example of something that not only adds humor to the experience, but it offers you assistance without ever feeling like you are being told what to do. 2 Point Museum is one of the best paced games that I've ever played, as there is always a carrot dangling just out of reach. The carrot never felt too far, I never felt out of my depth, and I was never bored. As a result, 2 Point Museum absorbed me as the hours easily melted away. Everything might appear simple at first, but as with the rest of the game, 2 Point Museum has layers and depth, and the mechanics are no exception. Let's use the most common example of displaying an artifact. It might begin with deciding which area of the museum to display it, but then you need to make sure it has the highest amount of buzz, which you would do by decorating around it, making sure people are getting enough knowledge from it by placing informational signs around it. In addition, each artifact has multiple tiers that can be discovered. Finally, you will eventually do enough research and analysis that you will unlock perks and perk slots on these exhibits, which will then add great passive benefits to them, like reducing the speed that they accumulate dust, which will free up a maintenance worker for other jobs in the museum. Speaking of workers, when it comes to hiring, people come in all varieties with different traits and quirks, but you will also need to train them to teach them new skills as they gain experience and new slots for knowledge open up. One of the main detractors of the 2 Point series previously is that the scenery gets repetitive and stale, and due to this, despite making progress, this can feel like you aren't moving forward, and 2 Point Museum remedies this in a few different ways. To begin with, the addition of missions, or expeditions as they're referred to in 2 Point Museum, greatly expands the gameplay. To display exhibits at your museum, you will first need to go on expeditions to discover artifacts, which, like everything else in 2 Point Museum, begins fairly simple. Usually, they are inexpensive and only require one expert. After that, they can become very costly, require multiple people with different specialties, and to reach new areas, you will need to meet certain criteria at your museums. Furthermore, becoming a phenomenal curator, as you are, has drawn attention outside of the prehistoric circle, and this means that your curating services are required at other museums. Outside of the traditional prehistoric museum, there are 4 other types of museums, including aquarium, supernatural, space, and science. Just one of these settings alone would be enough content for a full game, and would actually feel more analogous to the first 2 entries. There is still plenty of tongue-in-cheek humor with the exhibits, the patrons, the radio station, and the announcer, but it feels slightly more restrained, at least in the beginning. 2 Point Museum is still very funny, but for the benefit of the game, it feels less reliant on humor and more reliant on gameplay variety. One coincidental change for the series is that with the new setting, it actually becomes much more of a family game. Designing a campus or a hospital is not something that you want to do with your family, but visiting museums is a real-life family activity, which meant that trying to determine what the next best plan of action was for the museum together on the couch was a lot of fun. Despite 2 Point Museum being the best in the series thus far, there were a few areas that could have been improved or added. In terms of improvement, not everything always lines up perfectly when designing the layout of your museum, and you occasionally have items that will clip through walls. The 2 modes included were campaign and sandbox, which was added in a previous title, and these modes will easily provide you with hundreds of hours of entertainment, but it would have been great if they could have added another mode like a weekly challenge, something that only gives you a certain amount of time or a certain budget or has certain limitations. Having another incentive to return after the campaign would have been great. Every time I go to a museum, two of the major problematic areas are parking and food. I would have loved to go down the rabbit hole of food offerings as opposed to just having 2 vending machines and a coffee station. Obviously, if you offer more junk food, you'll have people that are less energetic and might need to use the facilities more. It's actually quite surprising that these weren't included. Two Point Museum feels less like a sequel and more of a strong new direction for the series. The expanded gameplay and improved variety means that not only is there a lot more to manage, but it also means that the lighthearted tone isn't doing the heavy lifting anymore. Instead, it accentuates the experience, which is now equal parts addicting and fun. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and find a lot more like it. Video games is a positivity-first gaming outlet. We believe that gaming should be a force for good. We focus on making uplifting content with constructive discussions and celebrating what makes games great. That's all for today, and until next time, be good to your fellow gamer, but more importantly, be better to your fellow human.